Thank you. Far too kind. Yeah. Ready?
Transformers franchise is just a disaster. I have yet to meet a single person who enjoys any other film that was not the first one. I mean, it pretty much represents everything that's wrong with cinema. Explosions over story, objectification of women, and an insanely unreasonable runtime. It also doesn't help that, at the helm of all these movies is Michael Bay, a perverted cretin who's been going through his midlife crisis since 2003. He's a man who thinks with his boner instead of his brain, and it definitely shows. On the bright side, without these films, we may not have had one of the internet's best movie reviewers. Doug Walker, aka the Nostalgia Critic, started out reviewing the first film over 10 years ago, and that hasn't stopped since, so at least that. With that said, let's take a look at this cesspool of the franchise, starting with, of course, Transformers. 10 years ago, this film came out, and I remember my 7-year-old self being extremely hyped for this film. It had cars, it had robots. These robots transformed into these sick cars and jets. It had explosions. It fit everything that this goof had wanted to see. And sure enough, I loved it. Rewatching it again, of course it's not amazing, but it's actually pretty alright. That seems to be the main reaction to this installment in particular. The effects still hold up to this day, and the voice acting from most of the Transformers is really good, especially from Peter Cullen and Hugo Weaving. However, this movie really suffers from excessiveness in its writing, including way too much inclusion of the human characters. Or at least not the right inclusion. To test my theory, I re-edited the movie and took out everything that was humorous filler to me, or just stuff that we really didn't need, and I ended up cutting about half an hour from the final runtime. If I had to rewrite this movie, I would keep the military stuff and get rid of anything having to do with Sam's family and dog. I'd get rid of Megan Fox too because her character and acting sucks. I'd also make Sam Anthony Anderson's roommate, and I would make this British lady the love interest, if anything. Now, of course, I haven't written the whole new screenplay word for word, but these are just the biggest things that would change. I would also make sure that I have continuity between my scene. When Black Hawk first attacks Josh Duhamel and his crew, it goes from daytime to dusk to night in about 3 minutes. Then, I'd actually make Bernie Mac and Anthony Anderson's character at least somewhat likable and not annoying characters that makes the audience wonder why they became so famous.
Shut up, Grandma!
Next, I take out the painful product placement. It's put in a way where it's unavoidable and very obvious. Plugs include General Motors. In general.
What?
Celine, Xbox, Porsche.
No!
And Mountain Dew. Finally, and most importantly, I would get rid of all the stupid shots at comedy here, or at least fine-tune them.
Were you masturbating?
Judy.
Was I No, Mom!
Zip it, okay?
No, I don't masturbate.
Please stop talking. Okay.
In any other movie, I wouldn't be bothered by this. Like in Fast 6, for example. They had a comedic scene that had nothing to do with the main plot. It was really just a filler scene with these two characters messing around with each other. However, it at least worked because it had good direction, great delivery, and a fantastic punchline. Here though, the main punchline is drugs and urination. The latter actually happens twice.
Bumblebee, stop lubricating the man.
I'd expect this in a lazily made Seltzer and Freebird comedy, not a multi-million-dollar blockbuster. That's really all I get rid of or change, because to be honest, the film is still pretty good. It may just because it has that nostalgic edge for me, but seeing those Autobots come down to Earth and transform for the first time, and we get our big introduction to all these characters is so well done. It's like if Spielberg directed this scene before it went back to Michael Bay's grimy hands. The score is fantastic, the action is fun, the characters are pretty memorable. It's just an overall fun film. I mean, it's not gunning for Oscars, even though it was very close to getting 3, but if you're expecting Academy Award quality from a film about robots who transform into vehicles and wage war against each other, you're really grasping at straws. However, you do expect quality, and you at least expect them to continue that quality into the sequel. They do not. Revenge of the Fallen was a train wreck. However, it's quite similar to another train wreck that was released less than 5 years prior to this film, Eminem's Encore album. This album was released when Mr. Mathers was going through a ton of drug issues, and you could really tell. The beat selection was horrid, the lyrics were a colossal step down in terms of wordplay, content, and especially flow.
His palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's vomit on his sweater already. Mom's spaghetti. I just like to pee. Yes, I make R&B. I sing song and go ring it strong.
and it's the worst rap album you'll ever hear in your lifetime. However, he was on drugs, so, I mean, you could kind of excuse it. I won't because, well, the album is still abysmal, but at the same time, there was a definitive reason for it. Same goes for Revenge of the Fallen, except drugs weren't involved. I don't think. This movie was made during something called the Writers Guild strike of 2007 and 2008. Basically, what happened was Bay ended up penning the majority of the script before the previous screenwriters, Kurtzman and Orsi, came in and did a few rewrites. It's kind of small, but that's why I consider Encore and Revenge of the Fallen to be spiritual twins. Only difference is that Marshall kicked his drug habit and he went back to being awesome again. The Transformers franchise never changed. Now, upon rewatching this awfulness, I actually think that there are some good ideas that really could have been expanded on. To be specific, we have reformed Decepticons who switched sides and became the good guys. I'm going, wow, that's really interesting. I have a million questions that could be answered about this. Even some of the action, dare I say, I thought was pretty good. And by some, I mean the one action scene that they kept advertising. However, they all get ruined by probably the biggest problem of the entire film. It's a flaw of the first film, and it's an even bigger flaw here.
Who's your little Autobot?
Oh, you're cute.
Name's Wheelie. Yeah. Say my name. Say my name.
The humor. It's surprising how unfunny this movie is, and even worse, they try to be funny every other minute. And these jokes are desperate, going as low as straight up racism, but we'll get to those two characters in their own section. Now the Autobots have a secret alliance with the army called Nest that handle any Decepticon terminations and cover up any massive destructive event involving Transformers. Yes, they not only expect us to believe that they covered up all the events from the first film, but they also expect us to believe they'll cover up the events in this scene by calling it a quote-unquote toxic gas leak. And even crazier thing about this idea, it works. You'll actually have people in this movie denying what happened, and the only ones who believe it are these techies who are basically framed as like these conspiracy theorists. Give me a break. We're also introduced to a cornucopia of just the most memorable characters. Just things that stick into your head. Like, a Stingray bot, Bike Triplets, and the Volt bot. A Voltron, I'm sorry, that was too easy. They throw in a whole bunch of new Autobots, but they never introduced them properly, so they're not as memorable as guys like Ratchet, Ironhide, or even Jazz. And he's dead. So you watch the intro and you're like, okay, despite the poor pacing, the excessiveness, and despite them only bringing in Optimus as a last resort instead of using him as their first option, I guess the scene isn't that bad. And you start to think that maybe this will actually focus on this whole Nest alliance. Nope. You wanted to see more Transformers in a Transformers movie? No, you don't.
That's stupid. You're stupid.
Have some more Sam's parents. Have some more Sam graduating, because that's what we want to see in a Transformers movie. Have some obnoxious action scenes. Have some dogs humping. Have Megan Fox, except this time have every shot in her make her look like a calendar girl. Also make sure she doesn't even care anymore at this point.
Wow, you're pretty confident, huh? Well, that's not gonna happen until I get my man-child father fresh out of prison back on his feet.
That's good. Okay, now make that 70% of the movie. This plot gets kickstarted when Sam finds a piece of the cube in his jacket that he wore during the first movie's battle, which I guess was never washed for nearly 2 years, and imprints a whole bunch of signals into his brain. This really doesn't come into play until he arrives at college, where hold up, we gotta have his roommates first. They establish him and the rest of his roommates as these wacky conspiracy theorists, like I'd mentioned earlier, and hold up, we gotta do a funny pop brownie scene because weed is funny! Drugs! Marijuana! Even though this is not at all how someone responds to weed. Anyway, Sam goes to a party with people he doesn't like, instead of chatting with the girl that he does like.
I can't stay long. I have a webcam date with my girlfriend. That's so cool.
You wrap your head around that one. We see him get these seizures that make him draw out the signals that are in his head. Then, we get the TX from Terminator 3. There's no other way to describe her except being a complete ripoff of the female Terminator. It's not even a good character to begin with, and yet you somehow make your ripoff worse. Anyway, we gotta have Sam meeting with Optimus. Prime basically says, hey, we need your helps with saving the world here, billions of lives are at stake, and our hero basically tells him to piss off until TX attacks him in the college, and only now the Autobots start coming back. Again, no continuity. By the time even one of them gets there, Sam, Michaela, and Jose have already fallen through a warehouse, and Sam already has the Matrix bug probe in his mouth. Slowpokes. And yeah, they fall through a warehouse and suffer nothing, not a single scratch. But anyway, we get our Optimus v Megatron fight, and yeah, it's pretty cool. Very cool, actually. Until Optimus gets killed and he's like, run. And then our actual plot begins. A mere 1 hour into this 2.5-hour movie, and it wraps up the first act. Unbelievable. Not to mention, they start to cram in weird stuff like teleportation and Transformer heaven that Sam enters when he's nearly killed by Megatron. Not to mention, just the most beautiful scene in movie history. Something that film historians are going to be calling just the most beautiful movie shot in history.
I am directly below the enemy scrotum.
Furiosa crying out in agony in Fury Road. The opening shot to Hugo. Move over, losers. This is true art. This, however, has everything to do with a rushed script and an overall troublesome production period. With that said, I have my limits. I would forgo this if it weren't for two problems that dropped this movie's score from a 20 to a 0. Yes, it's what I've been holding back from talking about the most.
What are we gonna do with this shrimp
No,
taco?
just bump a cap in his ass, throw him in the truck, and then nobody gonna know nothing, not me.
Skids and Mudflap. Now, if some characters play up on a few stereotypes, I won't really cry foul. Skids and Mudflap, on the other hand, are in a completely different ballpark. These two are the most racist characters I've ever seen. Strike or no strike, I can't begin to work out how those characters got past any censorship, be it Kurtzman and Orsi, DreamWorks, or Paramount. None of them saw this giant red flag. None of them saw how someone might take a robot who talks jive, constantly fights, and has a gold freaking tooth might be seen as just a tad offensive. In fact, why stop there? For all we know, they were gonna add in some big lips, make him eat watermelon and KFC and drink Kool-Aid. And hey, why not have every sentence end in massa, or better yet, make him not able to read?
Can you read this?
Read? Nah, we don't really do much reading.
Oh, come on! The blatant misogyny in this film was hard enough to ignore, but now they're adding in racism? What is this, 1956? The way I see it, this film came out at the wrong time. If they had released this either this year or last year, everyone would be losing their minds. Or they'd still be complaining about how no one wants female protagonists after Ghostbusters flopped. Even though time and time again that theory has been proven wrong. Hell, you were just proven wrong a week ago. Sorry, getting off track. It also doesn't help that these robots are voiced by Tom Kenny. That's right, SpongeBob voiced Minstrel and Blackface. If I sound like a social justice warrior here, I'm sorry, but I have my limits. Revenge of the Fallen crosses every single line, and at this point can be considered as excusable because of some writer strike. And why is Sam's roommate in this? He does nothing! Sorry if that part seemed tacked on, but so's his character.